Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I have a few comments I meant to get to in my last video. There's a funny thing that Kanye did on Piers Morgan that me and my wife were cracking up about, and a bunch of other news. And I want to get to all the tabs I've been having open. Hopefully, I'll get to do that today and close up a bunch of things that have been there sitting there for maybe even like weeks. I don't even know. This is Thursday, May 8th. But I want to start with these comments about Trump. Well, first, I want to say a couple of things. There was somebody who left a comment on my channel, and it appeared on my phone first thing. And the person was saying, fight, fight, fight. Trump's fight, fight, fight. The F is the sixth letter of the alphabet. So it was 666, which, of course, is the mark of the beast in the Bible in one section. And it's mentioned once in the Bible in the Revelation section that the Antichrist will come down with the mark of the beast. And, I'm not a numerology person, and the 666 thing is whatever it is. I don't think that numbers are evil or whatever. I mean, certain numbers. But 666 is a thing. Like, if it's used, like the Monster drink, they have these, that Monster energy drink. The M's are three lines that aren't connected. An M is connected, and those lines represent in the Hebrew language, the number 6 is very similar to the lines that are used. So it appears that they're using a 666 on the, it appears a lot. 666 is a thing. And, that would mean Trump has the mark of the beast on him, which, again, if that's why he's saying it. But I do know when you say things three times, they penetrate to the subconscious level. Saying things three times. There's a really good video about Jimmy Savile. It talks about how he's a wizard, some sort of a devil worshiping person. And, he talked about himself that the people in the village, he grew up in a coal mining village, and they all thought he was like something wrong, like he was like a witch or something, right? He was a seventh son of a seventh son, something like this, these kind of things, right? And he used to say things three times, to cast a spell. It was an excellent video. I'm not describing it very well. But they've, talked about all the documentation of him. He was a guy he was a pedo, like way worse than Jeffrey Epstein. Hundreds of victims, and he was good friends with the now King Charles. And he could just walk into Buckingham Palace like no one else had the ability to do this. He was like a DJ, right? So. But anyways, when you say things three times, they go to penetrate to the subconscious level. And so that's one of the reasons why it's 666. Like there's these things that are repeated over and over again. But anyways, another thing that was said, I saw this meme here on Facebook. Here, I just got to get distracted there for a second. Here it is. If you actually believe Trump was shot in the ear, you probably still believe 2 planes brought down 3 buildings. Which is classic. Classic sort of a meme. What I want to talk about how, my videos viewership is just dwindling for whatever reason. I got to go look into it. I just haven't been able to deal with that. I think it's more of a YouTube issue, but I think it's timed out with the Trump thing, which is just sad, right? With Trump, me covering Trump. So there were some comments that I wanted to get to in my last video. I forgot. And then I got some new ones. So I just, but there's the first one. A person writes, I saw a comment on Twitter from MAGA Brobot. American products will become less expensive when foreign products become more expensive. So mind-numbing. American products will become less expensive when foreign products become more expensive. Well, I'm not sure if that person means that when foreign products become more expensive, American products will be cheaper. But that means they'll still be more expensive, right? And, that's the logic of the Trumpers. They'll do anything to rearrange reality to suit their their current nightmare situation with what he's doing to them. Like he's screwing. You always screw your followers, your cult. If you have a cult, the people you always screw over the most are your followers. Like they trust you. There are people think that Trump is the reincarnation of Jesus, or they give him this like divine place. I mean, there's in terms of the fanatical, fan, fanatical. The word fan comes from fanatical, like people who are, when they used to make they showed these girls ripping out their hair and screaming incessantly at the Beatles, and that was staged, and they made it happen, in a way that it really wasn't happening organically, because they wanted to create that. The people saw movie videos of that, and then when the Beatles came to America, the American girls were copying the British girls, this kind of thing. But you have these, fanatical fans. And as a spiritual leader, it's more than anything else. Like a true spiritual leader, it's, there's the person is the placeholder for God. Like God comes through them. And, a true spiritual leader, somebody even has a little bit of, like a little bit of spiritual evolution. It's enough for people it drives them. People are, will do anything, like, because they represent God, and they're, people who are, they're seen as God's chosen person or something like that, right? And, Trump is kind of almost on that level, for at least his followers. And, so there's this other comment that goes with it. I want to read that first comment I just read. This one came in just slightly before that other one. And this had to do with the Fetterman video, right? So I made a video. My first Fetterman video was entitled, "I Think You're All Effed in the Head." And the person writes, the guy doing the voiceover, it looks like you can't ever tell anything that's from the name of a person or the little thumbnail, but it looks like a young man, right? Some young Trump supporter. The guy doing the voiceover says that Trump was a Democrat most of his adult life, but fails to leave out something very important. Democrats back then were more conservative than Republicans are today. Until Trump, Republicans were largely for illegal immigration so corporations could exploit them. Democrats were like Bill Clinton, were much harsher when it came to illegal immigration. George W. Bush wanted to give them amnesty back off, but backed off when he saw the public did not like it. Trump is what made Republicans against illegals. Trump was never against illegal immigration. Well, first of all, to say that Bill Clinton was more conservative than Republicans are now is silly. That this whole thing. I mean, that Republicans were for illegal immigration. The point about him, I mean, he loved the Clintons, and who, all Republicans, even Trump Republicans, hate the Clintons, right? So you can't, praise Trump for giving money to the Clintons. Like, this is how fucked up they are. Look how fucked in the head they are. That you think, and again, I'm not talking about this in terms of what I think. I'm talking about this in terms of what people who believe in the left, don't believe in the left-right paradigm, people who believe in Republicans versus Democrats think. That giving money to the Clintons and being a Democrat forever, and then, not being a politician, from a corporate standpoint, Trump was a Democrat, and he believed in abortion because he was banging hookers and strippers and porn stars, prostitutes, playmates, these things, young women. He was a Jeffrey Epstein guy. Like, they excuse everything. He said Jeffrey Epstein was a great guy. This is the quote from, the exact quote from Trump. "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy." Trump booms from a speakerphone. "He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life." I mean, that's like a fucked up thing to say. Use videos of them together laughing, like whatever it might be. And you can, dismiss that shit. But the only reason you're doing it is because you're delusional about Trump. But the more important piece to this is people who are embracing Trump are excusing all the red flags that Trump has done. Because Trump is worse than Joe Biden in terms of the truth community, even though Joe Biden censored us. Trump is doing things that is helping us. There's less censorship. You can see I'm talking about things, in a way that I wasn't able to talk about it before. And so that's better. It's better for me. And he's just nominated Casey Means, which I'll get into in the beginning of this video. So he's done things that I approve of, the trans, gender stuff, the whatever he's done with the getting biological men out of sports, which he caused, though. That's the other thing. If I'm going to be honest, if anybody's going to be honest, Trump caused that. It happened during Trump's first term. That stuff was happening in 2016 and went on for Trump's whole term because he didn't fight back. He didn't push back, and he created the energy. The anger and hatred towards Trump made the left do crazy shit. It pushed a social agenda. And, almost everything that happened under Trump during his first term was to push the left social agenda. It wasn't just that stuff. So much leftist stuff got pushed through, and Trump didn't fight back against it at all. And so, that's the reality. That's what happened. Those were, there was his words, but he wasn't even talking about it. Biological men were starting to play women's sports when Trump's first term happened. It started happening in 2018, whatever it was. It started, the Caitlyn Jenner thing started in 2015, 16, right, when Trump was running for president, and Trump didn't speak up about it at all. And so it just went from there, but the liberals were going crazy over Trump, and they were pushing this Hollywood morality, as a sort of a reaction. They were using the energy generated by the hatred of Trump to push it through. And not just this, a lot of other things happened. And Trump didn't speak up about them. So, there's the reality of the thing, right? But you have these people who are desperate, and they're not reality-based because, Trump's assassination attempt is fucking fake. It's fake as fuck. There's nothing real about it. It's completely staged. There's all the things that are red flags for this kind of thing, things that truthers believe in. Truthers look for red flags for staged events. And there's a lot of things we can't talk about, especially something if it's a shooting, because, they have made it so. And Trump then is linked to all those other things that were fake. Now, if this was a Democratic, was this as Joe Biden happened, everyone would have said it's fake. And it wouldn't have been as gaudy and Trump-like as this one. There would be no blood coming out of his ear. There would be no fight. Trump went for the big enchilada. Because of course he would. Trump did the same stage things, and I showed the compilation, many times of Obama and Trump and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and so many other politicians taking control over a person who passes out in the audience and acting like a doctor, give them some water and acting presidential and show that they care, and it's the whole thing. It's just a complete political theater. It's done over and over again. The lines are basically the same. It's a whole thing that's done. And they do it, and they get away with it. One time they had a pregnant woman pass out behind Obama. Obama was the worst. But Trump did it after what happened with the fake stage shooting, because he's political theater. Trump, in the stage shooting, was so WWE. It happened right before his convention, so it allowed him to come out. He had a new slogan, fight. He came out with that giant maxi pad on his ear when he had a cut that didn't even need stitches, according to the official story, that it was less than 2 centimeters because it didn't exist at all. The fake blood was already dried. He had, a Band-Aid on it when it clearly didn't need one. If you have a cut that's the blood's already dried, you don't put a fucking Band-Aid on it. It was silly, the whole thing. He had a small Band-Aid by the time he was interviewed by Fox News after the convention, and he had this giant, why would he need a fucking maxi pad over his ear? He couldn't be deformed. If they took off half his ear, that would bum people out. He would look weird. People this he's courageous, but we're not fucking having a half-year motherfucker we have to look for the next 4 years. Like, it had to be just a small... And Trump wasn't going to... he's a pussy. He wasn't going to get, like, actually hurt like they would do in WWE, where there'd be an actual cut, which would make it so much harder for us to say it was fake. But he got up and he did that fake fight, mouthing the words. And then the way the Secret Service behaved before and after, like the way that they allowed that guy to be on the roof for 8 minutes when they could have, the snipers had him in the line of fire. There's a guy on the roof pointing a gun at Trump, and they allow him to fucking, they have counter snipers there that, two counter snipers both see the guy. The guy's walking around with a rangefinder. And then the Secret Service allowed Trump's head to be exposed multiple times as he walked to the car. They let him get up and yell, fight, fight, fight. Like all things. Then stop, let me get my shoes. Like the whole fucking thing was so fake. And then he rolled it out at the convention. It was conveniently, everything about it. And then barely talks about it, right? He doesn't really talk about it. Like, Trump talks about everything. That would be Trump's biggest moment as a patriot and a hero. And he barely talks about it. He brags about everything else, but not that, because it's fake as fuck. Like, and he kind of almost acknowledged. I bet he wants to almost acknowledge that he did this great thing he'd say it was a sacrifice to beat fucking Hillary, to beat Kamala Harris, who was torpedoing her own campaign at the time. But the thing is that Trumpers are in denial about all these things, and so they have no basis to even comment. Like, if you're a Trumper, like, you're just, like, you're not a truther. You're running from the truth. You're delusional about the guy. And it's so many different things. I mean, he does a few good things, and you're like, oh, he's, But it's actually kind of worse because you think he's a truther. You think he's a person that believes in truth. You think he's a person that cares about America and Americans, and he's none of those things. He's worse. He's more selfish than... I can't say he's more selfish than Biden because, there's a level of selfishness that they're no longer, you've passed the threshold into narcissism. And, you can't really say, oh, well, that person's more selfish. Like, you're just all, they're all just 100% about themselves. Like, they can't even conceive of other people. They can't conceive of putting other people in front of them. They can't conceive of sacrificing for other people. And Trump is certainly on that level, and, Biden is as well. So, but they're just really selfish. They don't care about you. They don't care about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. Like when Biden went out, he fucked them in the beginning with Kamala. He knew that Kamala was an insurance policy, and he fucked them on the way out with Kamala. Like he activated his insurance policy. He did that. He didn't care if Trump won or not. Like he was saying, we're fighting for the soul of America. And then he just handed the election to Trump by making sure that they picked Kamala. Like, it was a big fuck you, which came out in so many ways. All these insiders were saying, yeah, he did that on purpose. Like, he hated Kamala. He just wanted to stick to the Democratic Party after they fucked him over. And so that's, like, how selfish he is, right? And Trump is the same fucking way. And Trump is, he doesn't care about the Republican Party or the people in it, and he doesn't care about any of this stuff. He cares about what Trump cares about, which is himself and his interests and, his people and only in the sense that his people will take care of him. Like he cares about billionaires that will, help him in some way, right? And so, with that, there was a few more comments I want to get to here. Let me find the comment I was going to get to. Here it is. Paul, I saw a police video. Paul, I saw a police video of the guy who was deported. He was pulled over for speeding. Supposedly he was transporting 8 illegals in his vehicle, which can be seen in the body cam footage. I think it's the same guy that's been talked about being sent to El Salvador. The Republicans and the people like, the Republicans, they put up a bunch of bullshit, just like the Democrats did. Years ago, so this is when Hillary Clinton was going to run for president, and eventually Barack Obama beat her. And there was an email, and one of our neighbors who was a Republican sent us the email. And the email said how George W. Bush was so respectful to the Secret Service and would just talk to them and salute them and treat them like thank you for your service kind of thing. It was an ex-Secret Service person, allegedly, like anonymous, some anonymous person. And then the Clintons, how rude and shitty they were, and how horrible they were, and just it got into this stuff, and it sounded pretty legitimate. Was done well enough where the person had enough inside information about what Secret Service people do, and these things. But I knew it was fake. It was totally fake. But it was just going around to Republican people, and maybe some of their relatives would get it. Some of the independent people, and it would never be fact checked, and it was stuff they just wanted to hear. And you see this kind of shit going through the right wing, the truth community all the time, where they post things that are fake as fuck, and it really hurts all of us. Like the Democrats do the same thing, and they have their bullshit stuff as well, and that hurts them because what do I always say? You don't have to make anything up to say how bad the Democrats are, how bad the Republicans are, or how bad humanity is. You don't need to make shit up. Like we are collapsing right now from our idiocracy, our immorality, all of it. Like we're functioning really poorly. We're unnatural people. And you don't have to make shit up about people because pretty much everybody, even if they're not aware of it themselves because they're just doing what everyone else is doing, is behaving in a way, the selfishness, the hedonism, the consumerism, everybody is behaving in a way that is, in any other kind of understanding of what it is to be a human being would be embarrassing. Just the selfishness alone. Like we're all very selfish. We're more selfish than we would be in any other system. And the people who are in power, who have money and power, have done things to get money and power. They have compromised any sort of moral integrity. They don't have a moral compass. And then once they get money and power, they take liberties with that money and power and do bad things across the board. There's no clean people. There's no clean kind of whatever. You could find dirt on all these people. And so you don't have to make shit up. Like you have to make shit up about the Clintons. Like, what are you doing? They're like murdering people. Like like you think you have to embellish how bad the Clintons were. You have to, put out this false kind of bullshit to, if people can't see it for what it is, right? And it's the same thing with Trump. Like Trump is the worst of the worst. It's just that he's an outsider, and he's saying things that no other Republican would ever say. He's doing things, it says stuff, and a lot of times, he says things that counteract what he's saying. He's all over the place, but any Republican, any Trumper, is basically rearranging reality and is in complete denial. Like probably the worst denial, because Trump isn't hiding who he is, and he isn't on your side. And now with the terrorists and all these other things. And so if you're a Trumper, you're the opposite of a truther. You're in complete denial. You're just rearranging reality to see things in a way to either not admit you're wrong or not take away your hopium. And you're like really sucking on the hopium pipe. Like you're just really blowing that opium pipe, right? Because it's just right there. It's almost comical how bad Trump is and how selfish he is and how fucking ludicrous the things that he's doing. And he's done some good things. There's no question about it. But those good things aren't going to be nearly as, like he's not passionate about them. So they're not going to end up being anything. And, you can't, the people that he's putting out there, have compromised themselves or they were compromised all along. And I'll get to that with Casey Means thing. Of course, with RFK Jr. They're people who are not, anybody who's in the political sphere is completely compromised and owned in some way or another. They're controlled. And so whatever damage they do to the powers that be, whatever truth comes out, it's going to be minimal. It's not going to have any effect because the system needs to, it runs on perception. I say this all the time. The economic system runs on perception. And so, there was another comment here. The American girl doll is made in China. So, because that's what his thing is, that all these dolls are made in China. And somebody wrote this: do you think people like Trump are a real spiritual being like us, or simply actors of spirit, used to teach real spiritual beings. I sincerely hope it's the latter, because if they're real spiritual beings, that meant God will let us bury ourselves in insurmountable karmic debt, if that's what it takes to eventually get us where we need to be. I can't imagine having to settle a debt like that. Yeah, well, we have freedom of choice. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm not saying, like, this person is obviously thoughtful, and I applaud that. But we have freedom of choice. People are burying themselves, not in karma, it's called samskaras. I've talked about this in the past, right? Um, it's buried themselves in samskaras. But let me reread that thing where the person says, I sincerely hope it's the latter, because if the real spiritual beings, that means that God will let us bury ourselves in insurmountable karmic debt, if that's what it takes to eventually get us to where we need to be. Well, people think that, I mean, what this person is saying is that you go so far in the wrong direction at some point, like you'll wake up and you'll become spiritual. It's really not like that, because the farther you go, the harder it is to redeem yourself, right? Like, there's a process when your soul first comes to be in a person, and you're innocent and you don't have critical thinking skills. Maybe you just came from you're migrating, transmigration of the soul from being like a dog or a cow or like a service animal, some animal that's around people or something like that, that's now a human being. There's all these possibilities of where your soul was before. But as a first timer, you're not going to have abstract thought. Again, unless you come from some higher level where you're above where human beings are, which sometimes you have these saints that come in, higher developed souls like angels that incarnate, what people would consider angels, something like that, right? They're coming from a higher level for spiritual work. But souls that are just coming up from a lower level, it takes a while for them to just even understand and level of consciousness that you have as a human. Like, you see, like, sometimes animals, like pets, they start doing human-like things. And then you see humans who are like, Jane Goodall and like people who go out and live with apes. They live with animals, like they become more animalistic, right? It's just if you're around something higher, it'll pull you up, and if you're around people who are lower, or whatever it is, lower life forms, they can pull you down, right? If that's what, like, people who like get obsessed with chimpanzees and things like this, right? It can pull you down to that kind of level where you're affected, like like there's animals have an innocence to them, which is helpful. They have energy, and how dogs are so loving in different ways, so enthusiastic. I mean, so that like you can have you have people in your life, and sometimes it's your pet, that really pull you up, that can help you, cheer you up, and have a positive effect on you. And for animals, like being around people, it has the ability for them to be around human consciousness. Like the cows that we had were dairy cows, and we milked them every day. And cows that you interact with are definitely have a higher level of consciousness, and they live longer. They're the meat cows that only live till they're old enough to slaughter, right? Where dairy cows can live for 10, 15 years interacting with people, and they develop like just a higher level of intelligence. I've seen the difference. Like the cows that you interact with that have a connection with people, they just get smarter. And so, there's this idea of moving forward on the evolutionary scale of things. And so, when you have freedom of choice and the freedom to manifest things because of the level of consciousness that you have, and you can plan things, and you can set goals, and you can imagine and build things, and you have a connection to divine inspiration, where books and ideas and art can go through you. And so human beings have the capacity to create and manifest at a higher level, and you need to learn all that. Like, there's a reason why you go through things, and you're going to make mistakes, because that's just normal. But there needs to be some desire to be connected to God, some desire for God's love, and just to feel love in general. And then when people lose that, they get buried in materialism. They brokenhearted, whatever happens to them. They lose their way, even as a higher developed soul. Like, this is what would happen to Satan and these demonic creatures, and then they get pissed off at God, for allowing them to fuck up their spiritual internal universe, and they get bitter and angry and all these things, and maybe they can come back, but it's really hard. It's almost impossible. But then there's higher developed souls that come down to do a specific work, and Trump could be one of those. He's not. Like he could be, he's doing God's work. Hitler was one of those that used to be someone who used to be a saint that agrees to come down as a villain. And so there's those things, right? But in all that, we have freedom of choice, and we have the ability to choose things. And so, there's you can see it. And we can choose. It's really how we choose it. Like, things are already kind of planned out. It's how we interpret them and feel about them. And how, like, we get angry at God. Because ultimately, when we don't accept the deal that our soul has created a plan for us, and we don't like something on that plan, and we blame God, or we think it's unfair, and we get into a victim state, and then we start doing things that are, that counter our spiritual nature. Because we feel like a victim, we feel entitled to do things. We're, hurt people, like that kind of stuff, right? So, that's where people go south. You start feeling like a victim. You get mad. It's really angry at God. When you come down to it, it's always anger at God. Like I went through a whole cleaning where I was angry at God in a past life. So, the massage mark system, it was amazing. Like I started, my serotonin levels went up afterwards. Like it was an amazing thing. After that was cleaned out on a samskaric level. But, all these things are, understanding samskaras is almost like essential to any kind of spiritual life, because you realize that you've brought things from the past, and you have to clean those out and figure out what those things were. And when you figure it out, as they get cleaned out, it helps you understand, why you felt the way you felt coming in, like things that you brought in from a previous existence. And so God will totally allow you to bury yourself because you've got freedom of choice. Otherwise, everyone would be just feeling the same way. We'd be automatons. There would be nothing sovereign about our experience, and we'd have no individual experience, and that's what's necessary here, right? Like we have to. It's good about it is we choose to do the right thing. In a sea full of wrong choices, many of them are tempting. We choose to do the right thing. And so that's that's why human beings can really evolve, because of, they're all the bad choices that are out there. You're doing it, you're willing yourself to do the right thing and follow God of your own free will. But going back to this thing with Trump, it's all based in perception. Our economy and the fact that the dollar bill, all this stuff, it's based in perception. It's what you perceive, right? And so, in that, Trump is fucking around with the perception. Like, you can say Trump is doing the right thing, which he isn't, but the perception of Trump, and the perception of, like, when people have to pay 4 times as much for something because of the tariffs, that will tank the economy in itself. And let's say Trump was totally right, which he isn't, that the tariffs would create manufacturing and bring America back to a time where Trump thought it was great. But we've evolved past that point to a service economy, which he doesn't understand, or maybe he does. Who knows what his real agenda is here? I think he's just fucking stupid and just lost. And he's just, he's feeling himself or whatever. And he's being encouraged to do this because he obviously is. But, if he was right, he would have to win people over, because to get to where we need to go in a positive way, right from where we are now, whatever it is, it's going to take eating some shit, right? Like, from a spiritual level, when you do the Sajmark meditation, you go through cleaning and it sucks. It just sucks. Stuff that's buried inside of you that you don't want to know about and don't want to face up to. Mistakes from past lives or things that you've done, just attitudes that you have to be rearranged. Like, you have to change your attitude. You have to become more of a service-oriented person. You have to bow down before God. And your ego doesn't want to do that. Like, even the most spiritual people have some shit they have to go through. And some of those things are physical illnesses and traumas, and just, even if it isn't anything substantial, it's just you feel like shit. the cleaning process. And to get to a place, a deeper place where you can connect to God, some scars have to be burned through. No pain, no gain. And for us to get to a better place politically or economically, we have to some of our lifestyle has to disappear. And you have to sell that to people. Trump he knows, he's like saying, you guys have to, who cares if you guys only have, your kids have one doll? He's talking about not just dolls, he's talking about a lot of shit. And he's like, Chinese garbage, we don't need any more Chinese junk. Well, you're making a unilateral decision. American people aren't over Chinese junk. I mean, how many people that are Trumpers shop at the dollar store or shop on Amazon for Chinese junk, right? And so, that thing that he's doing is not it's not sustainable because the American people didn't agree to suffer. And at the end of it, there's going to be no manufacturing. So the goal that he's trying to say that, it would be a worthy goal if it would work, but it's not going to work. And so, that's where we are. And there's a level of perception there. And the perception will be like, oh my God, this guy fucked us. And no matter what, even if he was doing something good, he's not doing it in the right way. And people should see that. You got to win the Democrats over. It has to be a long-term plan. It can't be just 4 years to bring manufacturing back. And the majority of people like the idea. And if you're those are shit jobs, like I talked about. Working in a fucking manufacturing plant, you die probably of some sort of toxin in the environment eventually. And it's just mundane work. You can often get injured. It's very hard physical work. Service jobs are a lot easier, a lot better, and they pay a lot more. Manufacturing jobs, union jobs, for the most part, were shitty jobs, right? And so, with Europe and these other countries, people don't want to do those jobs once you have a certain level of lifestyle. How many people out there want a manufacturing job, right? Only if you're, people are immigrants, or people are poor, and people are desperate. But the physical toll it takes on you, it just wears you down. Every person does manufacturing jobs has some, either carpal tunnel or some fucking thing that, they're shitty jobs. Trump is trying to, Trump thinks the American people kids don't even want it. Look at how entitled our kids were. You think these kids who are addicted to video games are going to go work in a factory for fucking, 15 hours to compete with Chinese people, or, fucking 16 hours or some shit, even 8 hours. These guys can't even work at Wendy's for 2 weeks. They can't even, these kids, it's just, the whole thing is a fucking shit show. And so then there was this comment. Paul, every Republican senator last week signed a bill to give Monsanto the same anti-liability as the vax companies, stating that these poor companies will go under otherwise, as Monsanto had to pay $2 billion to a guy for giving him Roundup cancer. So much for Maha. I think he says, I think I meant MAGA. So I looked it up here, and it says, in the context of Monsanto and successor Bayer, efforts have been made to limit liability, including legislative attempts at a state and federal level. These efforts often revolve around the notion that EPA-approved products should be shielded from lawsuits, especially those related to warnings about potential cancer risks. I was talking about Monsanto in the video, and I think this person was saying that they voted for it, but I don't know if it necessarily passed. There was a lot of Republicans, because that's what Republicans do. They protect corporations. If you see this guy, Kevin O'Leary, the Mr. Wonderful, he debates, he's Canadian. And there's this Canadian girl, she's 10 or 12, and she's, fairly articulate. And she's talking about how evil Monsanto is. But he had to deal with Monsanto. And he was talking about how they were trying to feed the world and how great they were. All this shit, right? It's just so bad. And he's, of course, a Trumper and one of those people, these corporate fucks. But anyways, that's that. Let's get into the rest of the video here. Okay, so let's start here.
The White House withdrawing the pick for Surgeon General days after right-wing activist Laura Loomer expressed dissatisfaction with the choice. Former Fox News medical contributor Dr. Jeanette Neshwat was set to begin confirmation hearings tomorrow. Loomer had criticized her for advocating for DEI initiatives and the COVID vaccine.
What? So Loomer is, she's really pro-Israel, but she's also, because she's Jewish and she's really for Israel, really anti-Palestine in a way that's extreme, like Trump. But she's also supposedly a truther. Like, she's obnoxious. She's horrible. Right-wing Trump bullshit truther, right? But she's saying that this woman pushed for the vaccine, which she did. I covered this somewhere. I don't know. But Trump was, he's the father of the vaccine, right? And so, you can disagree on something, but that's like a deal breaker. There are things that you could be, every person is a truther who's a COVID truther and who's anti-vax. There's no way you can vote for Trump. You can't say he's better than Biden, and the immigration thing is, whatever it is. Like, that was the worst thing. The COVID thing is the worst thing that happened in that period. COVID is, they censored everybody. They closed churches. Again, I'm not a Christian, but they were saying that science now rules over churches. Like, it became the time where we now live in a time of a religion of science. And all the shit that they pushed through and all the stuff that they did, plus they released a biological weapon on the world of humans. Like, this is a fucking evil fucking thing that they did. While Trump was president, he didn't call out any of that bullshit. He didn't speak truth about that. And then he accelerated the vax so much so that Bill Gates said that that Trump was too ambitious, in his claims that 2022 was a realistic because of the testing that they would need to do. But they bypassed all that testing, that's there for your safety. And even Bill Gates was against that. Like, Trump was more pro-vax, more pro-COVID vax than anybody. And then they took the Trump accelerated Operation Warp Speed thing, which, which we know about. And they, basically made it mandatory without making it mandatory. You'd lose your job or whatever it was that they did to make you get it. And they pushed it over and over again, right? Let me run that whole set of, let's revisit this whole thing. Let me run the set of Trump, the memes about Trump here, and then the, stuff about hatred towards anti-vaxxers and all that shit. Because that's what happened, and that was fucking bad.
Very long. We've instituted it before. 2 additional companies, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. As you know, the Johnson & Johnson's a one-dose, one-shot vaccine, so we're going to see how that works. That would be very helpful if that all came out, and I think it probably will. Also, they're showing tremendous promise, all of them, tremendous problem. We're very hopeful that the FDA will authorize the Pfizer vaccine within days. We've got to get it moving. And Moderna vaccine almost immediately thereafter. Large numbers of tests and samples have been done, so hopefully that'll go very quickly. If authorized, tens of millions of vaccine doses will be available this month, and we'll get it distributed very quickly. We'll have that all set, and hundreds of millions more will quickly follow. Every American who wants the vaccine will be able to get the vaccine. And we think by spring we're going to be in a position that nobody would have believed possible just a few months ago. Amazing, really amazing. They say it's somewhat of a miracle, and I think that's true. The plan we put forward prioritizes the elderly and patients with underlying conditions, as well as healthcare workers and first responders.
Greatest achievements was getting the vaccine done in 9 months instead of 5.5 to 12 years. But the problem is, we saved tens of millions of lives all over the world, but I can't talk about it because our beautiful base, of which some of you are there, you get angry when we mention the word vaccine. Don't get angry.
You did everything you could to get this vaccine out. I know where you
stand on the vaccine. It was one of the greatest achievements. We did it in less than 9 months.
To be able to do that. Yeah, but now it's taken a twist, right?
And then people don't want it. And it probably even affects the others because, there's a big situation with a lot of people don't want to take the vaccine. Well, this played right into their hands. And they want me to do public service messages and everything about everybody taking the vaccine. And look, I guess in a certain way, I'm the father of the vaccine because I was the one that pushed it. To get it done in less than 9 months was a miracle. Fauci said it would take 3 to 5 years. He thought it was something that just wouldn't be that effective because it would take so long to get. I pushed the FDA like they have never been pushed before. I wouldn't exactly say they're in love with me. They have never. This is a very bureaucratic organization. I pushed them like they've never been pushed before, and that's why we have it.
The vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. We would have had in 1917, remember the Spanish flu, killed perhaps 100 million people. Can you imagine if you had to go through what all of the countries of the world who are now getting the vaccine or soon will be getting it from various companies, but can you imagine if all of those countries had to go through what they've been going through over the last year? You'd lose hundreds of millions of people.
Let the teachers get the vaccine. They should get the vaccine. I hope they do. Again, it's something I'm very proud of. I think if we didn't come up during the Trump administration with a vaccine, you could have 100.
The best one, I'll play you it again. I got a better version. I found it on Fox, where Trump said he was the father of the vaccine, and it was a miracle. He is claiming divinity. The vaccine was divine, and his, whatever. This should put a stake in the coffin of this MNFer's candidacy. I mean, this is, even for the most hardcore Trumpers, you got to see this guy he got played. He played himself. He played you. I mean, just a, absolute POS. Let's play that clip again.
And look, I guess in a certain way, I'm the father of the vaccine because I was the one that pushed it. To get it done in less than 9 months was a miracle.
It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask.
You shouldn't cut anti-vax people out of your life. They could be dead tomorrow. Spend time with them, call them, get in the will.
Screw your freedom.
The latest data that confirms that we're still in a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Continue to be among the unvaccinated, are among the unvaccinated, are unvaccinated. The unvaccinated, there are people who are dying and who will die who didn't have to. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it now. Do it now. It could save your life, and it could save the lives of those you love. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals, are overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or pancreatitis or cancer. This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you, the people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: we've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. As I speak to you, millions of Americans are still unvaccinated and unprotected. And because of that, their communities are at risk, their friends are at risk, the people that they care about are at risk. But if you're unvaccinated, you're not. And you're putting yourself, more importantly, maybe from your perspective, your family and your friends at risk. Ultimately, those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
You are not allowed to infect anybody just because you think you've got rights that are delusional, of course. This delusional, evil idea, you got to identify those people and bring them out into the open so you know who they are. If you're willing to walk among us unvaccinated, you are an enemy.
At this point, staying unvaccinated is like wearing a Yankees hat to a Red Sox game. You're probably going to end up in the hospital, and it's your own damn fault.
I was so worked up over the weekend about this fucking Aaron Rodgers of the NFL. I don't even know where to begin with that story. I mean, this fucking guy, I don't watch football. Sorry, I'm not a big fan. I know the guy's a real good football player. That's why they put up with his bullshit. If I ran the NFL,
he's going to be a Hall. You came across as a national embarrassment.
He's talking to Aaron Rodgers. You came across as a national embarrassment.
There is no other way around it. It was the most embarrassing performance of Aaron Rodgers' career.
Jeopardy and possibly putting your teammates in jeopardy, to me, is selfish.
I give Aaron Rodgers some advice. It would have been nice if he'd have just come to the Naval Academy and learned how to be honest.
Southern California, where as of yesterday, we started giving the vaccine to kids aged 5 and up. Finally, our kids will be able to go to.
Let's see.
Woo! Woo! Oh.
I'm not vaccinated.
Oh,
where are you going?
Oh.
I take horse pills.
Yeah, we have to wait for them to be vaccinated because they are selfishly a endangerment to other people, including staff people here. So while we're all hopeful, and I join the president in being hopeful that we can reach a place where it is safe for people to be. What is this, the honor system? The honor system as to whether somebody's been vaccinated? Do you want them breathing in your face on the strength of their honor? So let's just see. Let's just see. I mean, again, this is about science and governance. And science and governance, we have a responsibility to make sure that the House of the Representatives chamber is not a petri dish because of the selfishness of some not to be vaccinated.
Teach people common sense. You need to get she doesn't even know what else to do to get the people of her state to get smart and listen to the facts and get vaccinated so people don't die. It's like that simple. Is it not the people who choose to remain unvaccinated right now who are causing all of this?
It is selfish at this point to not get vaccinated.
If you can be vaccinated and you refuse to, that's a selfish act. You're putting other people's lives and health at risk. You should get vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
The new cases in COVID are because of unvaccinated folks. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind. Because they are keeping the majority of Americans behind.
I think I just passed a house with a Halloween yard decoration that was a bunch of skeletons burning an anti-vaxxer at the stake. I'm gonna go.
And so there it is. It says anti-vaxxer right here. Took me a while to see this. That's why I'm pointing it out. And it's got a bunch of skeletons sitting around a campfire roasting a skeleton anti-vaxxer. This is supposed to be a fire, which is pretty effed up. Like, it's really effed up, right? And what my wife pointed out was, what do these guys die from?
Not that Halloween is a contest, but they want it.
It's the platforms like Facebook.
They're killing people. I mean, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
What he's saying there is that posting words on social media is killing people. And they've made this like the worst thing. That you're a bad person for posting things that aren't verified by the official story. This is a guy who droned children. He ordered the deaths of children in Afghanistan when he ordered a drone strike on an imaginary enemy to distract from a failed war and a disastrous withdrawal. And so there are horrible things being done all the time. But now they've made posting things on social media one of the worst ones. But it ended up not being true, right? He demonized anti-vaxxers and people who were posting things on the internet, and ended up being him who was the liar and the person that was putting people in jeopardy.
Effects or reactions would be most common from these vaccines?
Well, generally, the most common reaction is what you see with most any other vaccine. A sore arm, a little bit aches, you might feel a little bit fatigued and down for 24 hours to 36 hours at the most. A small percentage of the people might get a fever that would last for 24 hours. You take a Tylenol, you can take care of that without much problem. The safety of severe adverse events is really very good. In the 30,000 people in the Moderna trial and the 44,000 people in the Pfizer trial, the one we're talking about today, there were really no severe adverse events.
They didn't list any side effects. I mean, that's, a sore arm or, these things. I mean, he's talking about just how you feel after you get the vaccine, not 2 months out or 3 years out or 5 years out. But now we know that there are multiple side effects, which I'll get into after we go through these things here. We know that there is admitted to side effects, things that they're investigating, and things that are related to people dying. And one of the ways we know that they were being deceptive and not saying what some of the side effects were, because they never showed you commercials that came from the pharmaceutical companies themselves. It was social influencers or media personalities or Jojo Magoo. It wasn't Pfizer posting commercials, because if they did that, they would have had to list all the side effects, which we still don't know what those are, right, in terms of what they discovered. And it's still being studied, right? It's not even like they're fully, it's fully been vetted by even the pharmaceutical companies themselves. So this was all lies, right? Again, they lied to people and said that this thing was safe and safer than getting COVID. And, this turned out to be not true, right?
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
It's to prevent severe disease, which we don't have data for that for kids. But I guess to me, the risk-benefit calculation looks like this. If the vaccines are safe and the side effects are things like fatigue and headache and muscle soreness at the injection site, I would much rather deal with that for a day or not at all. I mean, most people actually have no side effects. And so I would much rather deal with side effects like that, but understanding that we're giving something that is safe and that can prevent the possibility of something horrible from happening, which is every parent's worst nightmare.
The question asked by the presenter was that because children really weren't dying from COVID, why give them a vax and risk any sort of side effects and things from the vax? And she, of course, said that there was no real side effects from the vax, which we now know is completely false, right? And we know that kids, there's something like 1,500 kids or less than that was the official statistics on the CDC died from COVID. Many of them had severe health issues going into the disease, right? So what she said here is, that she's saying, well, your worst nightmare is your kid's going to die. Again, putting the fear out there. There is a positive association with the word safe. Advertisers and presenters use the word safe to get people to buy their products. Safety is a big thing with people. And when they're scared of something like they were of COVID, and they were offered something that would keep them and their family safe, and they withheld information or out lied or, just made false claims with no scientific basis, and saying this would keep you safe, then people went and got the vax. And now we know that things are different. And so all these lies and deceptions, and she had the nerve to say the unvaccinated can't be trusted, right? And so the other piece to this, which we now know, and both Bill Gates, I have the memes here, I've saved these things, and Fauci have both admitted that COVID wasn't beaten by the vaccine. The idea that the vaccine would give herd immunity and COVID would disappear because everyone would be vaccinated and they wouldn't get COVID because they had the vaccine, and then, it would just disappear because no one would have it and they couldn't pass it on to other people. This idea of herd immunity through vaccination. We now know that COVID mutated itself out of existence, or mutated itself into a more safer, more contagious form, and that everyone had ended up getting it anyway. So the vaccine turned out to be relatively unnecessary based in what these guys are saying here.
In beating COVID-19?
Well, sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B cell and T cell immunity, and it's done a better job of getting out to the world population than we have with vaccines.
I think what one referred to, what was not anticipated, was the extent of the mutations and the amino acid substitutions in Omicron, which is really unprecedented. It kind of came out of nowhere, where you have a virus that has 50 mutations, 30 of which are in the spike protein and 10 or 12 of which are in the receptor binding domain. The thing that's important is that it appears to be able to evade some of the immune protection of things like monoclonal antibodies, convalescent plasma, and the antibodies that are induced by vaccines. That's the sobering news against severe disease. But when you get to Omicron, the protection significantly goes down.
Keeping the events that are safe and also the events that have fun for people too. We can't be canceling everything, especially if we're going to be living with COVID for the foreseeable future. I would say that if you choose to go, make sure that you're vaccinated and boosted. Make sure that you're wearing a mask, even though it's outdoors. If there are lots of people packed around you, wearing a 3-ply surgical mask. Don't wear a cloth mask. Cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. There's no place for them in light of Omicron. And so wear a high quality mask, at least a 3-ply surgical mask. And if you're going to be visiting elderly relatives.
Recently, when you said here on CNN that cloth masks were, quote, little more than facial decorations. So in light of Omicron, what kind of mask should we all be wearing? And were you surprised by the pushback from your comments?
Well, I was surprised because this is not the first time that I or Professor Osterholm or really any of us public health experts have been saying that cloth masks are not appropriate for this pandemic. It's not appropriate for Omicron. It was not appropriate for Delta, Alpha, or any of the previous variants either, because we're dealing with something that's airborne. We're dealing with a virus that's extremely contagious. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know about masking. And then we didn't have enough masks, enough high quality masks for healthcare workers. And so we were trying to ration those. But then pretty quickly, we recognized that COVID is airborne.
Do you agree with the move?
I do. There was and is a time and place for pandemic restrictions, but when they were put in, it was always with the understanding that they would be removed as soon as we can. And in this case, circumstances have changed. Case counts are declining. Also, the science has changed, but rather that the responsibility should shift from a government mandate imposed from the state or the local district or the school. Rather, it should shift to an individual responsibility by the family, who can still decide that their child can wear a mask if needed.
Take New Jersey, the case in New Jersey, for instance. Their new case average is just over 4,000. Is that an acceptable number to do this, or are they projecting out to March 7th at this point?
I don't think we should be looking at case counts at all at this point, especially when we're dealing with a milder variant and when so many people were exposed to Omicron and therefore have at least some level of protection either through vaccination or immunity. The key number that we should be looking at is hospitalizations. If our ICUs and hospitals in that particular region are not overwhelmed, if they're not over capacity, we can set a number, for example, 75% or 80% full, then we should be able to relax all restrictions. And I actually believe that we should be starting to, with the first restriction removed, should actually be the restriction on children. Because while for adults, you could say, well, what's the harm of adults masking when they go into a grocery store? There actually is a harm that we should be discussing of children continuing to mask. That doesn't mean that masking doesn't have its place for children when there are very high rates of hospitalization. If we get a new variant in the future that children are particularly susceptible to, we may want to bring masks back. But we should also be intellectually honest and say that masking has had a cost, especially for the youngest learners, people with English as a second language, children with learning disabilities. There has been a cost to them. So the risk-benefit calculation has really changed.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
So
she should not get it?
if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
The current vaccines are not infection blocking. They're not broad, so when new variants come up, you lose protection. And they have very short duration, particularly in the people who matter, which are old people.
I knew these vaccines were not going to protect against infection, and I think we overplayed the vaccines, and it made people then worry that it's not going to protect against severe disease and hospitalization. It will, but let's be very clear. 50% of the people who died from the Omicron surge were older, vaccinated.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
So then here's a longer report about this.
To some developing news tonight. President Trump replacing his pick to serve as Surgeon General just one day before her confirmation hearing. That pick now pulled, but he's already got a replacement lined up. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who's joining us now. And Vaughn, this individual has dabbled in what critics would call and have called something like pseudoscience here. Why is she so
Pseudoscience.
controversial?
Right. Casey Means is actually the sibling of Callie Means, who is already working at HHS as an advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the HHS secretary. Both of the Means, they have a wide following. They are both critics of what they say to be big food and big pharma industries, and also universities and the medical school system. They have big influence followings, and they are big advocates for preventative care, making the case that medical schools are teaching people how to care for chronic diseases after the fact instead of addressing metabolic health on the front end. There is a vaccine skepticism, would be a generous terminology to describe the would-be Surgeon General if she were to be confirmed, her position, Casey Means' position on vaccines. But both of these individuals, Casey Means, if she were to be confirmed as Surgeon General, and her sibling or brother, Callie Means, are working as advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., really round out a medical team, if you will, inside of the executive branch that are very much individuals who are skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry and have a deeply skeptical questioning concerns about.
And why wouldn't anybody be that, right? Why would you say, there's 200 different medicines. I could pull up the article. It was like Vox or one of those, this liberal-leaning sort of whatever it is. Like liberals in general should be. I mean, they used to be the people that you'd go to for alternative health. If it wasn't for the liberal movement, we wouldn't have herbal medicines and things in the U.S. We wouldn't have organic foods. And now all of a sudden the Republicans are embracing this. I mean, this is the flip-flop part of it, right, where the Democrats went nuts over COVID. I recently told this story about my wife's friend whose husband was just basically murdered in a hospital. And my wife and I were just talking about this morning because, it's just... she's thinking about a lot. I asked her about, the whole thing, like, when they knew that they didn't get the vaccine. So they were, Republican-leaning people who knew about the medical community. And I asked her about it, and my wife said, well, the woman said, we knew. But they, 3 times, in the process of her husband being diagnosed with COVID and put on a fucking ventilator, even now in 2025, which is unthinkable. 5 people were in the hospital diagnosed with COVID. And, of course, COVID is so much more mild now. It mutated itself out of existence, right? It's no longer, deadly. And she said she was, so the woman, a rude nurse said, if you leave the hospital right now, you'll be back here in an hour with cardiac arrest. The guy wasn't showing any signs of heart issues. Like he was having a respiratory issue, maybe a little difficulty breathing. And so, but this rude nurse, and she said, I knew better, but I just got scared. And this is what I always say. People always run back to the system, especially the medical system. You can be anti, all the stuff. And then when your life's in threat, you run back. People always do. It's just because there's the other system, the alternative system isn't, as developed, and it's always a lot of the new age stuff is pretty fucking cheesy. It's not effective, and people always run back to and that's what just happens, right? And so, in this, these people are mainstream people, Casey and Kelly Means, but they're really smart. Like, they know their stuff. And her story is that she was a Stanford doctor, they're both from Washington, D.C., rich, elite, smart people, family, that successful, people who are, base their success out of academic excellence. They were both, they're really intelligent. And I heard the interview first with Tucker Carlson, which is a great interview, and then follow up with Joe Rogan, maybe some other clips. And, they're part of the beast. They're in there, they're in the show, right? And now they're really in the show. And so, there's no reason for me to be skeptical or not. Just how I feel about these things. I know that we're not going to turn things around, but what they talk about is very compelling. And I learned things from both of them in hearing them talk about these things that, might help me talk about things here. It's not really, it wouldn't change my decision-making one way or another towards the way I proceed with health. But they said things that I had no idea and were kind of interesting. And both of them are, like I said, they're smart and they're very articulate in this area. And, their conversations are worth listening to. And it's, baffling that liberals, because there's these people seem like they'd be more liberal oriented. The Cali Means, he worked for like big food and tobacco industry as a lobbyist, and he was doing evil shit. And his sister, after getting her degree in medicine, said that she, there was all these things that were happening where they were just addressing the symptoms, and they were all specializing, and they didn't know, like, there was nothing on nutrition, there was nothing on preventative care. I'm all about preventative care, right? Because most of the things that are modern day diseases are caused by our immune systems being destroyed, by our foods and our environment and these things. And there's no pharmaceutical medications that are there for to boost your immune system. And I was saying earlier about that Vox article. There's 200 different medications that cause depression, severe depression, and or suicidal ideation, or both. So there's 200 medications that the symptom is suicide. Like, all these medications have these horrible side effects because they're powerful drugs and they go against, they're not stuff that enhances your system. And, people know what happens when you go through this process, right? And so, like, what this guy's saying, why would anybody not be for this person? Just based in, like, how many people have a big pharma nightmare story of a medication they were on? How many people are on psychological medications only to find out they turn and make you feel worse? And then they have to get off they have to go through withdrawal. So many different drugs, like they're causing some side effects here, or just the medical community just, once in a while you find a healer. Like, I've had a number of times where I found a good allopathic doctor who was a healer. I just lucked out that way, just protected in some way, and, which is great. But I've had my issues with the allopathic medical system that have hurt me. And just, even as a kid. And so I'm well aware of the, do no harm thing is bullshit, right? And so, again, this doesn't validate Trump as being better because he does one good thing here, one good thing there, because he's doing some really bad shit, right? That's, it is, but, it doesn't equal out, right? But it is a positive thing, in the sense that whatever, these people are in terms of them being shills, Kelly and Casey Means, like, no one should be trusted, but we should always, I don't want to say have hope, but if something good is happening, something good is happening, right? Like on the spiritual field, even when you're dying, even when things are going south, your efforts are still a part of your own spiritual journey. Like even when the world's crapping out around you, you can still strive to be, the best version of yourself and work towards. Just because everyone else sucks doesn't mean that you have to, jump in and go along with it, right? And but then also realizing that some of this stuff in terms of the material world is futile. We can't save a system that this is this far gone. And the powers that be, that they would be up against, the RFK Jr. and the Meads' siblings, and all the rest of these people, all these little groups of people, all these moms with autistic kids, all these people are trying to fight back, and people who've been suffered from COVID stuff, or people have been hurt by the vaxes or something, all that stuff. You can't fight the system itself. Again, it's based in perception. And if everybody realized the true nature, like if everybody knew what I knew, the system would no longer work. Because people wouldn't believe in it anymore, and it would cause widespread panic. Very few people can accept the demonic nature of the system and still just, unless you have a deep connection to God and believe that this is part of God's plan, that you can live with the system the way it is. Like you have to be in denial, or it's just too painful. So there has to be some spiritual detachment and realizing this is God's plan. That's the only way you can survive, like the true knowledge of what's going on here. Like that's how I do this job every day, because I believe that this is part of God's plan, and that I've accepted it. The evil's coming out, and it's hard to look at. It's hard to feel, and it's hard to see. It's hard to think about. But there's a purpose here. If there isn't, then we're all fucked anyway. So either this is a part of God's plan, or it's just really fucking, or we're living in a horror movie.
The impact that it's had on governmental decisions in the past. So, as you noted, there is a great many skeptics and critics of the science that is pushed and advocated by Casey Means, and a defensive of...
Yeah, it's people who are part of Big Pharma, and people part of the food establishment. We know that there's carcinogens and things that create heart disease in foods. Like you walk into any grocery store, particularly like a Walmart, but any of them, and you can see people with a shopping cart full of cancer and heart disease, because this is what those foods do, and this all can be prevented. And Callie Means talks about this more specifically than his sister, that all these things that they do, that these are, these chemicals that are in the food that are not, they're legal, all the shit that they do. And the food industry, which has a very strong lobby, and the medical industry, which has a very strong lobby, I would be shocked to see if they, the actual laws and rules and things could be pushed through. But there are a lot of people who hate Trump, like women, liberal women, some of them who are, the people waking up about like just canola oil or whatever it is, right? All this shit that's in food. People are aware of it. And for this, it's them, this is their issue. Like this is their abortion. This is their number. This is their immigration. They're more concerned about the health of their kids and the future of America, and atrazine and these fucking chemicals and shit that have been banned in Europe and other places. And so they want, real food and all this processed bullshit and all this, things that additives that are harmful to people. And so, for them, this is a win. We'll see. She gets nominated, and we'll see what happens. But it would, it would be at least a symbolic of some positive thing.
The pharmaceutical industry and medical schools in the science that has been long presented over decades to deal with chronic diseases. But this is really the president, by nominating her to be the Surgeon General and replacing her with...
Like, this guy almost knows he's full of shit, like the way he's saying this. Because all this stuff he's saying, all these chronic diseases are caused by the food industry and the medical industry. They're putting toxins in people's bodies, and in companies that, pollute the area. I mean, there's all this stuff that happens that's creating cancer. Cancer isn't just something that, cancer could happen in a healthy person but very rarely. Like, there's a cancer explosion. And it's, people say it's parasitic. That's the new thing that we're hearing. I don't know if that's true or not. But if it's parasitic, whatever it might be, it's happening because people have a weakened system based in foods and based in big pharma, and we're not, supporting our systems naturally. We've gone against nature. And most of the pharmaceutical drugs are based in natural, like herbal supplements and things, but they're chemical in nature, and they have, they're very aggressive, and they have horrific side effects, and you're putting something unnatural, like a chemical compound in your body, and depending on your type of body, they're going to be, it might work for you or it might cause you fucking to die, right? I read these things all the time, these pharmaceutical things, and oftentimes there's a side effect is death, right?
Her with the individual who we should note was the sister-in-law of Mike Waltz, the former national security advisor, is really a turn and a vote of confidence in the way that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is at this point running HHS.
Vaughn, why is Laura Loomer's name, the right-wing activist, why has her name come up in all of this?
Right. Laura Loomer is somebody.
Look at this fucking cool. So this is a problem, right? How is this an asset to have on your side? This fucking ghoul. Look at this fucking.
Here who is.
She's like 22. I mean, she's young. Like, she's not like this. She looks like she's like 90, some 90-year-old witch with.
Been skeptical of you, if you will, of cabinet officials that have been entering this administration, and one who has been skeptical of really anybody that has been entering the Trump orbit here. And this is another case of that here. And so when you're looking at Laura Loomer and the pushback that she gave to.
This is very mild to what I thought it was going to be. Right? They're trying to make this about Laura Loomer and not about Casey Means, right? Like, everyone can see that Laura Loomer is fucking a problem, and people on the left or whatever. But these guys probably don't want to be so blatantly on Big Pharma's side when there's a chance, and I don't think that's going to happen, but RFK Jr. and the Meanses could legitimately be about what they say they're about and expose information and then repeal some of these, like the vax courts or some of these other things, and there could be liability. And then there could be this, and not that it's going to happen, but these people are fearful enough. Yeah, that's just like, I believe this is why they're doing it so mildly here and not doing a hit piece, that all this stuff could be repealed and Big Pharma could be, the information could be leaked about what Big Pharma's done. And that these people are all complicit, and all these news agencies taking money from Pfizer, stuff that we know about would become public. And so, this is way milder than I thought it was going to be. So I would think it would be based in that, because they all know there's fucking poisons and shit in pharmaceutical medicines and foods. Like, we all know that. And so, that this is a system where you eat addictive foods. That's one of the things that Callie Means talks about, that the tobacco industry, when they got rung up for cigarettes being harmful, they had all this research on how to make things addictive, and they put it into foods. And so they made all these foods addictive. Many of them, of course, were unhealthy, all of them probably, the addictive qualities themselves. And then there was an obesity crisis, and then all the other things that went with it. And they talk about how Ozempic, which could become something that was given on Medicaid, could bankrupt the American economy because it would cost the American taxpayers $3 trillion a year, all these people with Ozempic, and then all the health issues they'd have afterwards, right? And so they're not debating those things because people know Ozempic's like fucking brutal, and they know that fucking kids are getting fat, and that all this stuff. So they bring in Laura Loomer here, right? Which, is an easier target. And then that doesn't put them on the hook. They still are on the hook they're still owned by Big Pharma, but they don't want to be seen as shills for Big Pharma if things go south here, which I don't think they will, but there's always a chance.
To the Surgeon General pick, who is supposed to go before her confirmation proceeding tomorrow. She has been highly critical of Michael Waltz and suggesting that the president has not had appropriate allies in some of these key positions. And now, of course, the president here, just 3 months after making this initial Surgeon General pick, is already changing his mind before the confirmation process even began.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much for bringing us that developing news breaking late tonight. Appreciate that.
Thanks. Okay, so maybe let me see if there's anything else that's more aggressive, because this was just breaking news. Okay, so Trump nominates Dr. Casey Means. I searched for this. Trump withdraws Surgeon General pick and nominates Dr. Casey Means, NBC News. This is the one we looked at. This is the one I showed you. These are the two videos I showed you, those two clips. This is from NBC News, CNBC. Again, nothing inflammatory in the headline. I'm going to refresh this. I did this earlier, but there's one I wanted to make sure I show you here. News coverage, global lens. News in a minute. This one, there's one down here. News real. Trump nominates vaccine skeptic wellness advocate Means as Surgeon General. And so these aren't the kind of things you would usually see where there'd be, some inflammatory language. I just refreshed it. It's still, there's nothing out there. They can't wait to shit on Trump, and they always do. And they shit on all of his picks. I mean, they were pretty harsh on RFK Jr. And, anything that Trump does is worth at least a couple of seconds, a minute long, video clip where they're shitting on him. There's nothing from CNN here, which is weird, right? CNN isn't saying this. He's withdrew a pick. At least that means something. And so, this was 13 hours ago. Let's do the filters based in today. There's one video up here from. So, I think there must be something that they're concerned about not shitting on her. And I could only think it would be blowback because they obviously, they work for Pfizer. And so there's a reason why they're not shitting on her as a pick. I mean, she is someone who's alternative medicine and has been, as they call it, a vaccine skeptic. So that's kind of interesting. So this is something I haven't gotten. Who's this dude? I haven't gotten to, but it's been up my toolbar for 4 or 5 days.
Allowing a legal fight with President Trump after he issued an executive order instructing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to defund the organizations. They're arguing he can't do that. His order claims that America's two biggest public broadcasters should not get the more than $500 million in taxpayer funds to public radio and TV stations nationwide because he argues they don't present, quote, a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events. Despite the president's order, the CP...
So unbiased, I mean, they are certainly liberal, leaning to the left and scientific. They're scientific. But, there's no unbiased at this point, right? I mean, the truthers would be the most unbiased. People who talk about truther stuff. And the most unbiased truthers, everybody who's not saying what I'm saying here wouldn't be what I consider a truther if I'm right. So the two things that I say here that other people don't say, one, that the system, it should come down because it's taking us in the wrong direction. And for us to move closer to divinity, I don't know if you heard that thunder and lightning. If it didn't move closer to divinity, to connect to divinity within you, the system is something that's blocking that path. So the two things I say here, that connecting to the divinity within you, only spirituality will save this world. And the second thing, which is, that the system can't be saved and shouldn't be saved. If those things are true, I think there's all the evidence is there for you to say that they're true now, right? And, that it's your soul's goal. It's your soul's path and your goal in this life to connect to divinity and move closer to the divinity within you. If that's the real goal, which I believe it is according to the Sajmark system, meditation, but it's not, the Sajmark system meditation doesn't own that as an idea, right? No organization or no group or no person owns that as an idea. That's either truth or not, right? If your true goal, you have a soul's purpose, a soul's path, is to connect to the divinity within you, merge back into the source, that's either true or it's not, right? And the system is unsalvageable. That's either it's true or it's not. And that the system needs to go so that we can get better, that it's taking us in the wrong direction. Those are all truths, or they're not truths. And if they are truths, then that's the most important truth, right? It's the most important thing, because your soul's path, your reason for your existence, your reason for being, not what your ego has hijacked your reason for being, whatever you think it is as an ego. That is, the most important thing, that you find your true path. And again, I was talking about this in terms of religion, the one true religion, and there's no one true religion. There is whatever the truth is that you're supposed to do, and then there's methods to accomplish that goal, right? There's routes, there's routes to take on a trip, right? You can go by plane, you can go by spaceship, you can go by the Star Trek, where they break down you on a molecular level and transmit you. There's all these different ways you can go in terms of traveling. You go by boat, you go by canoe, you can walk, right? You can skip. I mean, there's you have these different systems and methods, and then it comes down to the best method, right? But in terms of everything that I say here, those are the most important things, and so, and not just me, for anybody. Like, what's your purpose for being? What's going on with the system, and what do you need to know? And just the sense of preparing for what's going to happen. And so,
PB is a private entity, and it was created that way by Congress to insulate it from political pressure. NPR tonight says it's going to challenge this order, and the chief executive over at PBS said this, and I'm quoting her now: "The president's blatantly unlawful executive order issued in the middle of the night threatens our ability to serve the American public with educational programming as we have done for the past 50 plus years." All of this comes as the president...
You mean we're not going to see Caillou anymore or Sesame Street? There are some good things on PBS, like some of their nature shows, but they're always, they usually drop some global warming bullshit in there. There is, there's clearly bias. I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I don't feel it's good like Trump is just getting rid of anything that disagrees with him, because Trump is not a truther. He is the opposite of truth. Trump is using some of the truther narratives for his own agenda.
The president's newly proposed budget that we were just talking about with the Congresswoman would cut more than $6 billion from NASA as it moves the agency's focus away from space science to primarily getting astronauts to the moon and to Mars. My source tonight is Bill Nye, who we all know from PBS as Bill Nye, the science guy, and also the CEO.
So to bring this guy in, so Bill Nye, was always a creep and kind of, goofy. But we all talked about this probably in 2015. He had a show that was more provocative. It was more for adults, but it was, still in a kid format. And he did it on Netflix. They had this Netflix money. And he did one on transgenderism and the gender identity stuff. And he says that scientists are now proving, there is some scientific data proving that there is a difference between biological sex and gender, which, there's not. There's no scientific proof for that. There's zero. They could never prove that. Like, even if it was true and it's not, they couldn't prove that, right? And, a bunch of us covered this, and he had that woman, Rachel Bloom, I believe her name is. Wow, I pulled that one out of nowhere. That was, impressive for a guy who's getting Fetterman as he gets older. But Rachel Bloom did this really, almost pornographic song. And kids are watching that. And this guy played himself because there was no scientific evidence for something that was being pushed on people as being a popular theory, that there's a difference between gender, and that, they have these 270 different genders, like astrogender and vapor gender and all that shit. And he was pushing that, and that's not science. Like, when you abandon your principles as a religious person or a scientific person or as an atheist or as a truther, when you run back to the system or you make some shit up, then you lose credibility, right? You don't say something that's scientific data when it doesn't. So this isn't great for, this piece here, to bring this fucking guy in here to argue for why we should save PBS. You bring in this fuck?
Of the Planetary Society, and it's great to have you back here, sir, because obviously, you've reached countless people through PBS over the years, fostering a love and an understanding for some of us of science. I wonder what you make of this.
Is that what you did, dude, here? Caitlin? The other Caitlin? Is that what you're bringing in this guy? This is your expert? Like, you're going to bring in that other fucking asshole, too? That other dude, that other science guy they always bring in.
This news tonight.
Well, it's not good news for us. It will be in modern terms, it will be unpopular, and so you'll find that.
Boom! Funny, Bill. She gave Caitlin a big smile.
They'll find that a great many small
Neil deGrasse Tyson is going to bring that fucking guy.
Communities rely on public broadcasting for weather information, for evacuation information, and so on. And then everybody who's a parent has raised their kids using public broadcasting children's programs.
Yeah, those fucking things, right? Remember when the Teletubbies were like sodomizing each other? And the Christians were really upset by it. It's just,
there's nothing like it. And that's why the organization was created, the system was created, and that's why people are going to push back against this. The this will be very unpopular with members of Congress and the Senate. They will push back, and this is another executive order that was made for reasons that aren't entirely clear.
The clear is that you're calling bullshit on Trump, and you don't represent half of what people believe. Trump is a bullshitter, and so are the Republicans, and the Trumpers are all fucked in the head just like you guys are, because they're not being reality-based. But, that's why he did it, and that's like, you can understand. I don't agree with Trump doing all these things, and I have mixed feelings about this, but admit that you guys are biased against him, that you think you guys are smarter than the fucking stupid-ass Republicans that vote for Trump. And yeah, they're stupid, but so are your followers. Like, the liberals are batshit crazy. And so, you guys are all fucked in the head, and that's why Trump did it, because, you're biased against his morons,
But it will not, people won't, I don't think will stand for it. And the legal issue will go on, I guess, for a long time.
I'm sure you personally must have interacted and encountered so many people over the years who have talked about how beneficial that was to them or to their kids or to their families.
Well, it's not millions or tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people watch the Science Guy show. Thank you all. Put my heart and soul into that.
Yeah, so they're all fucked in the head now because of that bullshit that you pushed.
That thing. And this is elementary science that is for many people that I have spoken with.
So if you ever get a chance and you have Netflix, watch the episode where he talks about gender. It is a fuck. It's like a total fuck you to science. Because there's zero scientific data. He's totally selling himself out for that liberal agenda they are pushing on Netflix and those other places. It's abhorrent. I don't know what other bullshit shows he had there, but it's clearly something kids would watch because he always talks down in a condescending way. But it was like PG-13, but you wouldn't know it because it's Bill Nye the Science Guy. And it was weird. It was fucking weird on top of it.
Is sort of the main science they got in middle and often high school. And so the reason we made that show and the reason the show was made at that education...
Because you're a fucking Satan-worshipping anti-Christian science guy?
Level, it was based on very compelling research back in the 20th century about what people needed to get this fundamental understanding of science. And everything happens for a reason, Caitlin, and that reason, it's usually physics. So if you want to have...
No, it would be God. It would be a divine plan. Look at...
If you want to have this advanced military capability, this, for example, this Golden Dome, you're going to need people in the pipeline to come be engineers and physicists, scientists to
And
build.
you take away Bill Nye Science Guy, you'll have none of that shit. And you won't be able to get people from other countries like we do now, because American kids won't do math because they're too fucking lazy and entitled. So you won't be able to do a brain drain from the best minds of other countries where they're, there's like a lot of engineers coming from India, some of these Eastern countries.
This extraordinary system. And those people are going to get their love of science from public broadcasting. So this is...
Oh, Jesus Christ, bro.
Yeah.
This is very well done.
You know what? I doubt people even watch this shit anymore because there's so much content on the internet that's better. Those Blue Planet, Richard Attenborough. Like, I like the show Nature, and I haven't watched it in years. I like nature shows. Like, more than anything else, I watch little animal videos. My wife and I send her back and forth. I get these little short videos on Facebook, and then sometimes YouTube recommends them to me and things like this. And I'm interested in animals. As a kid, I used to go to the library and look up my favorite animal. Like, I'd go down there with my bike and, I'd go, and I'd buy an encyclopedia at home, and I wanted to be a naturalist, these things. So it's kind of my, my first love in terms of, what I thought I might do as a career. And, whenever I'm out, I'm looking around, seeing, observing nature and doing all those kind of things. Interacting with some animals, like you guys see my frog videos and things, and the animals on the farm, these things. And, there's better shit out there than what PBS has put out there. The Richard Attenborough, the Blue Planet ones, they're just better. The film quality, the stuff the PBS used to do when they were the only game in town for that, except for the Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom that was on every Sunday night. I don't think that was PBS. But they're just, there's a lot of stuff out there you can get on YouTube that's like better than shit that you see on PBS. Real science, things that are done by real scientists and more compelling stuff.
Documented and so on. This is not an...
All right, that's enough, Bill. This is the title of this video. I was waiting for him to get there. Extinction level event for NASA science. Bill Nye on proposed Trump cuts. It's just silly. As a scientist or as a religious or spiritual figure, you just have to be caught lying once. As a doctor, any of these professions where, integrity, and especially a doctor for people, you just have to be caught fucking screwing people over, recommending treatments based in your financial need, shilling pharmaceuticals that are bad for people. You don't even do research on it. It's just because the big pharma company flew you out and gave you $100,000 to do a talk somewhere so that you'll push their medication. These types of things, right? You just have to be shown a little bit, one, corruption as a spiritual person. You could do great work as a scientist or a spiritual person or as even a doctor. But as soon as people start questioning your integrity, you're fucked. And it only can take one slip, one mistake. Maybe something happened years ago. And the scientific community with NASA and the moon landing, there's so much questions about, you lost the fucking telemetry data and you still don't know how to get through the Van Allen radiation belt. And you went to the moon, like, it seems fun. And now there's all these movies that include a narrative where they fake the moon landing. Multiple movies about that. We just watched that Capricorn 1 or whatever it was that was out when I was a kid. I never got to see it, but one of my viewers said it was about the faking of a Mars landing. And then, there's just recent movies about this, where there's 4 or 5 movies and TV shows that have a faking of the moon landing as part of the script, right? And so, that's a big one. So now you're fucked. There is real science out there, but, now all of science is tainted. And, people on the right are never going to believe it. Just like religion's tainted that they don't admit, but it's both things.
You do not think children with cancer who are American citizens should be deported?
You do not think.
Looks like it's all the Democrats and none of the Republicans.
We even said, you know what, many of us will not.
What the fuck's going on? You're doing raising your hands now in fucking the Senate?
Offer any more amendments tonight. We won't vote for the overall bill. But if you agree to this, we'll drop. any other amendments. We'll take the win that this would be in the bill, that you would agree U.S. citizens can't be deported. They voted to allow Donald Trump to deport U.S. citizens.
That's pretty stunning. House Democrats reacting there after judiciary.
So this is real concern because Trump has already hinted at wanting to deport, and he's opening up Alcatraz, and he's got these prisons in El Salvador where he thinks he can just ship people off. And he's saying these things that it used to be when Trump said shit, you were like, oh, he's not going to try that. But that was during his first term. And so this is real. This stuff's real. Trump has said this himself. And this should be something everybody should be concerned about, that they can take American citizens and bypass their judicial rights, their Miranda rights and their rights to due process, and just send them to El Salvador.
Judiciary Committee Republicans rejected an amendment to block ICE from deporting U.S. citizens. Hours later, a Texas judge ruled the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act for deportations illegal. Joining me now, Barrett Berger, former federal prosecutor. Barrett, good to have you back. So the message from the Judiciary Committee Republicans is pretty clear. But how do you...
as a U.S. citizen, you should be concerned, even if you're a Trumper, that this shouldn't be fucked around with. For the very simple reason, even if you think Trump is great and he's not, in 4 years, that means that a Democrat can do the same thing to you. And so you're giving away your rights. Trump's taking away everybody's rights, pretending it's just like, oh, we'll just do it to the people that will just trust us. You don't trust. Trump is the most untrustworthy motherfucker out there. I mean, of all of them. And he's been fucking you guys over, you Trumpers over, without your knowledge. And to give up anything, especially, a right, especially a right to due process, is everything. And Trump will take everything away because he's a fucking dictator, right? A dictator on day one.
How do you interpret the equally strong message from that Trump-appointed federal judge in Texas?
This was a very important decision by this judge in Texas.
Okay, there's some here about the Supreme Court. So you move it forward here.
Is this legally problematic for the government?
No, and let me just say that with an asterisk. The government regularly uses certain markers to have to determine whether somebody has gang affiliations, terrorist affiliations, organized crime affiliations, right? One thing that can be used in connection with other evidence might be tattoos. If every member of a gang has a certain tattoo, you have somebody else that has that too. If there is other evidence also tying them to this gang, that could be something that the government would rely on here. What's interesting, though, there is no one that's saying that this person couldn't necessarily be deported if they had committed a crime, if other factors were there, according to the law, according to due process, not necessarily to El Salvador, if there's a court order saying he can't be deported to El Salvador. But of course, people who are here without legal status, who commit crimes, should be deported. Absolutely. However, as the...
She's saying what I say.
Supreme Court has said they deserve due process to make sure, number one, they have committed the crime, and number two, they are being deported to an appropriate place. That's why the due process is so important.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying all along. Like, Trump's just fucked, and Trumpers are fucked with him, and it's just, this country's fucked with even without Trumpers and Trump. It's just desperate times and desperate people clinging on to something that doesn't really exist. Look how excited she is. Clicking onto something that doesn't exist, right?
And that's what's been missing in this case.
Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson this week addressed what she called the elephant in the room, referring to Trump and his allies' attacks on judges who rule against his policies. She said, quote, "The attacks are not random. They seem designed to intimidate those of us who serve in this critical capacity. The threats and harassment are attacks on our democracy, on our system of government, and they ultimately risk undermining our Constitution and the rule of law." And she also urged her colleagues to show raw courage to dispense justice without fear of the results. How unusual are statements like this?
unusual. Supreme Court justices don't like speaking outside of court. They prefer to speak through their writing or from the bench during oral argument. They don't usually like having to give any sort of political speech and shy away from that. We've seen in a few instances.
Okay, so the title of this video, SCOTUS feels intimidated and scared over Trump administration targeting judges, which is, Trump is breeding this hostile ground. And you can rationalize and say how bad the Democrats are, but Trump is as bad or worse. And, like I said, the system has to come down and somebody's got to do it. So he's doing God's work, but not in a way that people are happy about, right? I mean, so, that is whatever it is. So I've had this up for a while, like weeks.
Challenging Senator Joseph McCarthy that continues to resonate today.
No one familiar. This is Edward R. Murrow, who, whatever. But this was this guy.
United States. I sat down yesterday with George Clooney at the Winter Garden Theater to discuss Murrow, journalism, courage, the op-ed he wrote last July calling for President Biden to drop out of the presidential race, and the state of the nation today.
Okay, I got to go find the part. Let's see if it's here.
I can't believe that the movie Good Night and Good Luck was 20 years ago.
20 years ago, I know. 20 years ago this year.
Yeah. What would make you...
Powerful words for who we are at our best. Even now, I have people some knuckleheads, saying, well, he thinks he's a journalist. I don't. I've never claimed to be a journalist.
Knuckleheads.
I always look at them when they laugh, because now you're laughing. As a reporter and as a newsman, you see it. There are much higher paid people.
McCarthy loses, at least in Murrow.
I respond, and most of the people I know, I get it. When I saw people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time to...
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure.
This is the op-ed here.
Did something that a lot of people would call brave when you wrote your op-ed?
It was so brave of you.
Well, I don't know if it was brave. It was a civic duty.
Civic duty.
Because I found that people...
His movies are like, the point of the movies, I think there's only a few good ones that he's been in. Like, he's been in a lot of high-budget movies. And there is, and even that one that I saw, I forget what it was, it's a guy's name, like the character's name. And in the end of it, he's a lawyer and he's like a fixer. And some guy who's a company that hires his firm that he's friends with just loses it. And the guy is defending some monstrous big pharmaceutical or company that poisoned people. And he falls in love with a girl who's a victim, either her husband or somebody died, family members of this company. And he gets all the information to her so that they can win the lawsuit, because the guy just loses it. And he figures it out. Like George Clooney, the guy ends up getting killed, but all their information has been given to this girl. And she's going to win this lawsuit. And they're trying to fix that. And they try to kill George Clooney. And he goes to the CEO of the company. I'm not the guy you kill. I'm the guy you pay off. Like, I would have taken money. You don't kill me. It's like, but it's all like, all his movies, even that one, it's about pointlessness, that there is no point, that there's no point to life, that it's just random. Like, that's his thing. And if you watch all his movies, even the comedies, that's the general theme, which is a weird thing to have, even like that kids movie he made, Tomorrowland. Like, there's just the depression that he has. He was one of the first people to put on dress, like he was, had all these A-list celebrities that put on a dress. He did it early on in his career, like his family was in the he's a Nepo baby.
On my side of the street, I'm a Democrat. I was a Democrat in Kentucky, so I get it. When I saw people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time to...
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure. It's okay. Listen, the idea of freedom of speech,
Oh, Jesus Christ, bro. I can't believe I kept this up on my toolbar this long for that. That was a big thing that Joe Biden, now he's written a book about it, Jake Tapper, about Joe Biden. But we had that, In 2019, I said, this guy is showing signs of dementia. I can't believe they're running him. And it was easy to see. Like, I mean, you know, I documented this. It was there. Most people in the truth community saw some of it. I could clearly see it. You know, and I think most people did. I think pretty much all of us were saying that this guy was too old and he was showing signs of, you know, this mental breakdown. And then it got worse in 2020, and it got worse every year after that. But it was bad enough in 2019. It was already there probably at the end of his vice presidency with Obama in 2016. So that's why they didn't back him for president in 2016. And then 4 years later, after Hillary Clinton shit the bed, they turned to Biden as their next best option. And again, with a guy that senile, they could do whatever the fuck they wanted at a time where we would see massive looting of what was left of the American system. And, you know, for these guys to come in at the last minute and call that fucking brave is silly. You guys were fucking years behind the truth community. Okay, one of my viewers sent me this. I'm not sure who sent it. It's been up there for a while. I got two more. One funny thing with Kanye coming up, and then I'll wrap this up. I still didn't get all of the stuff I want to cover here. But this happened.
Some of what they had to say.
And one guy, he was up there with our mum, and he went up there, and he was coming back down towards us, and he goes, "Run, he's got a gun." And our heart started to pound, and I said, "Oh, Mum, where's Mum?" And poor Mum was stuck up there, but apparently our brave Mum, she goes, "Are you all right?" Because he had all blood all over his face. And he goes, "I'll shoot you." She goes, "Hey, I'm here to help." And Mum distracting him to make him look the other.
This is a real news program. This really fucking happened. It's a holy shit moment. So Kanye West, you know, I always applauded what I considered him doing performance art. That oftentimes was hilarious. And his trolling. You know, he's been doing some shit that just crosses the line for me, and, you know, just the way he's doing it. It's kind of stuff that ends up being counterproductive for us in the truth community too. But before that, you know, I was a big fan of his performance art. Very entertaining. He comes on Piers Morgan's show with this guy named Sneeko.
Both Sneeko and Ye join me now.
This is Sneeko here. That's Sneeko.
Welcome to Uncensored. Ye, we haven't spoken for a while. How are you?
I'm doing good. I don't use the term West, you know, the whole drop the slave name idea.
Okay, so we just call you Ye, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, look, when I last interviewed you, we had a long conversation. And since then, a lot has happened in your life. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to try and talk to you about some of this. How would you say your life
He's texting.
is at the moment?
Okay, let me move forward because I don't know how much of this I could use. So he says, well, look at the view, which is kind of funny. Look at this Mallorca, Spain. You know, very close to Boston, Spain, where Alec Baldwin's wife grew up. Just a side shout out to shit on Alec and his wife. But this is the part I want to show you.
You've got 32 million followers, so you're one of the most followed people.
See, wait. Now look right now. You're not gonna take inches off my dick, bro.
You're not gonna take inches off his dick, bro. This is really funny.
Followers, so you're one of the most followed people.
See, wait. Now look right now. You're not gonna take inches off my dick, bro. Like, how many followers do I have?
Well, how many is it?
I think you could do the study. You got a whole staff over there.
I thought it was 32 million. How many is it? You obviously know.
I mean,
look, Sneeko doesn't talk. He says, "Go up."
No, I mean, don't help them out. You know, they.
I'm told it's 33 million now. So congratulations. You're slightly bigger following than I thought.
No,
don't take inches off his dick, Piers.
No, congratulations. Your information is correct. You're not just some, dude trying to sub. I'm a gift, bro. You know what I mean? Why do all you people in media act like you haven't played my songs at your weddings or graduation.
So he goes on to compare himself to Michael Jackson and other people. But that, don't take inches off my dick in an interview was one of the funniest things I've heard. And so, with that in mind, let's wrap this thing up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.